Hey people, welcome back. I'm Any Pride from Milk and Cookies Total War, and this morning, Creative Assembly released their free content and 30th anniversary plans for the upcoming Norsca DLC going live on August 10th. And it's some pretty big news. So every faction that hasn't already received Regiments of Renown in the Grim and the Grave and the King and the Warlord will be receiving 6 new unit variants designed for niche roles and specific purposes on the battlefield, which means the Beastmen, Warriors of Chaos, Brettonia, Wood Elves, and Norsca are all getting a bunch of new free content. Now remember, these Regiments of Renown don't represent the entirety of the free content plans. CA was explicit when they said that every race would be getting something in the upcoming patch. And I seriously doubt that means we're getting any new Legendary Lords or Midland and Boris Todbringer or anything like that, so temper your expectations there. But a rework of the original, unequivocally weaker Legendary Lords could possibly be in the cards, especially considering Kemmler's rework and his unique Krell skill tree, which we already know is coming on August 10th. The likelihood they rework one weak Lord without touching the others, when we know every single faction is getting more love, seems pretty unlikely to me, so that could definitely be a possibility. But with all that said, let's jump in and look at some of these new units. So I want to start with Chaos first, because I think their new units are some of the best looking in the bunch, and frankly, they're the most deserving of this update, so let's jump right into it. So the Demon Spew are Forsaken blessed by Papa Nurgle with poison attacks and the Swarm of Flies ability, which reduces melee attack in an area of effect. It's a pretty terrifying combination on Forsaken, which they're already insanely fast, 48 movement speed, so you can't really get away from those guys, and then you're getting slowed by poison. That's going to make the Wood Elves and a couple of the other squishy factions really sad if they're trying to kite. These guys are going to be pretty terrifying. And these are the Slaaneshi Mirror Guard, a long-awaited bodyguard unit of Sigvald the Magnificent with mirror shields that allow the Geld Prince to jerk off to his own muscular body whenever he feels like it, so that's about once every couple of minutes or so. They look awesome, super cool looking model on them, they're immune to psychology, increased movement speed, and improved melee stats as well. Now when they say increased movement speed, 38 movement speed isn't anything really to write home about. It's not terrible. I do wish they would go a little bit more outside the box and think like, hey, this is a Slaaneshi unit. We could very easily make this unit 45, 50 movement speed on foot. It doesn't really make them OP. It's still a very niche unit. Like aspiring champions aren't going to be suddenly massively overpowered just because they have the movement speed of Forsaken. That's kind of the entire point of Slaaneshi units, but either way, these guys are some of the best looking Regiments of Renown included in this upcoming free LC. The Swords of Chaos are Archaon's personal bodyguards, who play a pretty large role in the End Times Archaon storyline. They have a smaller unit size than a regular Chaos Knight, a new Guardian ability that's on a few of these new Regiments of Renown that confers a 30% physical resistance ward save in an area of effect. They have flaming attacks, bonus versus infantry, and the Apocalyptic Charge ability, which grants a passive charge bonus buff map-wide, so for every single unit in the Chaos Army once they get within a certain distance from the enemy. So these guys sound like they're going to be pretty powerful, and I'm going to love running them with Archaon in his campaign and in multiplayer as well, as long as they're not too expensive. The Weird Spawn are Chaos Spawn with armor sundering melee attacks and physical resistance. Obviously they're unbreakable like all other Chaos Spawn are. Really loving that green glow coming out of their mouth. And the Soul of Damnation is a kind of strange hell cannon. It has the Soul Devour ability that increases reload skill when damaged, which effectively doubles its fire rate, which sounds really scary on paper, but on stream they said it's when units get within a certain range of it that it activates this ability, not necessarily when it gets damaged, so I'm not sure which one to believe on that front, but if it only activates when it gets attacked, it could be sick against counter battery tactics, assuming it doesn't get blown up right away by a couple of dwarf cannons or something like that. But if it's only against melee stuff, like when it gets tied up in melee, that's pretty weak, because letting melee units tie up your hell cannon is the complete opposite of what you should be trying to do with it anyway. And if they've already done that successfully, your opponent that is, the enemy is probably already inside your minimum fire arc, and you won't be able to shoot with a hell cannon anymore anyway. So, I don't know, the ability sounds like it could be super strong or super bad, not really sure. But what we did find out about hell cannons was, we found out what the global buff for the Hound in the Norsca campaign is. So, remember last week when they showed the Norsca campaign, they blurred that stuff out. So if you raise settlements for Khorne, your last unlock for Khorne is a Iceforge Legion Hell Cannon battery that gives you 4 Hell Cannons in a single unit. which sounds incredibly strong, but again, that's only going to be for the Norsca campaign when you're playing single player. It's a Regiment of Renown. It won't be in multiplayer, I don't believe, but that sounds like it could be a lot of fun to rock with. And finally, for Chaos, the Summoners of Rage are dragon ogres with magic attacks and a single-use chain lightning bounce spell that only becomes available after a set duration in melee. As we know, chain lightning in this game and vortexes in general not incredibly impressive, so this is more like a flavorful addition. But maybe if your opponents get very blobbed up around these dragon ogres and you plop that on them, you might be able to do some decent damage. So it's a nice touch anyway. For the Beastmen, no Gorgon, no Doom Bull, no Jabberslythe, and no Torox the Brass Bull, unfortunately. Maybe one day when Warriors of Chaos get their full marks, the Beastmen will get their Chaos God marks as well. But for now, these Regiments of Renown will suffice. So the Destroyers of the Drakwold are Ungor Spearmen Herd with extra melee defense and poison attacks, which is pretty useful on a bonus first large spear unit. Gonna slow down those cav real nicely. The Blackhorns Ravagers are Gore Herd with shields, with Stalk, Vanguard Deploy, extra armor, and extra charge bonus, so they sound like a pretty powerful flanker. Korok's Man-Rippers are Bestigors with halberds and a bonus first large, charge defense first large, and defensive stats, which is an interesting departure from most Beastmen units simply because they're usually more focused on offensive maneuvers and speed, but these guys provide you with a bit more staying power and cavalry killing potential, which is something they kind of lack. And the Eye of Morslib is a Cygor that walked into Athel Loren and stole some of the Knife Ear's Amber, throws that around, and has the Warp Gaze ability, a hex that lasts for 16 seconds that completely immobilizes a target unit. So think of a mini Net of Ammontok on this guy. Sounds incredibly strong for the Beastmen. They do lack some things, but now they're going to have a mini Net of Ammontok, which might make this particular Cygor worth bringing for sure. It sounds pretty strong. Sons of Goros are the bodyguards of the famed Goros Warhoof, a named Centaur character for the Beastmen, and they have the Guardian Ward Save and physical resistance for nearby friendly characters, extra armor, and magical attacks, which is something the Beastmen typically lack. One thing they really struggle with is against the vampire counts, against ethereal builds like Cairn Race and Hex Race. They don't really have an option for killing them other than Flock of Doom. And now, with these magical attacks, they'll be able to deal with those much more effectively. And the Butchers of Kalkengard are shielded minotaurs that cause terror instead of fear, have health regen, which is pretty big for the Beastmen, honestly, because they don't have access to the Lore of Life or any other healing potions anymore, and a pretty awesome cowhide pattern with an otter belt. So that's a pretty nice touch there. Nice to see the minotaurs get some cow loving. And for the Azrai, the Wood Elves of Athel Loren, the Winterheart Guards are unbreakable with charge defense against all, which means infantry and cav and monsters, which is really nice, pretty cost-effective anchor on the main line. They're the Eternal Guard who watch over Athelwith, the high realm of Athel Loren, locked in eternal winter, where the forest spirits are always asleep, because it's always winter. No summer ever comes to this realm of Athel Loren. So, the Eternal Guard here are extra badass, because they have to be. They don't have Treemen Ancients or Treekin backing them up when they come under attack. The Wild Hunters of Kurnus are the personal bodyguards of Orion with the Guardian ability, which will have some insane synergy with Durthu and the Tree Spirit units especially. You're just stacking a ton of physical resist on top of each other, getting into the campaign levels of ridiculousness, even in multiplayer. You just gotta keep them close to your lords or heroes to confer that passive 30% physical resistance buff though, which isn't always the most logical place for flanking cav like Wild Riders, but you might want to just use these guys in reserve and save them for the late game. That could be pretty strong. Loex Tricksters are Azrai Spear War Dancers with an ability called Loex Shroud that gives them stalk and extra speed, so they can stealth up on enemy cav and slaughter them alongside Wild Riders, so really good in those cav engagements to help turn them in your favor. And an improved War Dancer buff called Storm of Blades that grants more melee attack at the cost of melee defense. Firebark Elders are hands down one of my favorite units in this update. I think they look just completely badass, so awesome looking. They are Treekin from Aeronach, the Summer Strand, with fire attacks, fire resistance, and the Wildfire Aura ability, granting nearby units fire resistance. So you can basically plot them in the middle of a bunch of Treemen Ancients and Treemen and Treekin, and all of them will be getting that passive resistance to fire attacks, which is really strong and nullifies a huge bonus and counter to tree units in general. The Hawkeyes of Drakira are Way Watchers with the Smoke Bomb ability that the sneaky stabbing units already have, for the Goblins have for the Greenskins. And this will dramatically reduce enemy speed in an area of effect. So you see an enemy cav unit charging you, or Warhounds, you pop the Smoke Bomb, run the hell away, and these guys will be able to get the hell out of dodge and still fire while they're running away, because they can fire while moving, which is pretty powerful. Especially a heavy cav unit comes in to try to attack you. You slow them down, get a couple of nice armor-piercing volleys off from close range, and confer that minus 16 leadership penalty on them as well, because they do discourage any enemies they shoot at, and that's just very, very strong. Really helps those Way Watchers be a lot more survivable when things try to hunt them down. And finally, the Wardens of Sithral, or Wildwood Rangers, with Spear and Shield, Vanguard, Stalk, and Charge Defense against Large. And even Norsca gets Regiments of Renown. So Soul Crusher is a really cool looking War Mammoth with the Enrage ability, granting him temporary physical resistance, and Strider, which ignores terrain penalties, which doesn't sound amazing on a War Mammoth, but might be useful in some situations. I think most of the maps in the current multiplayer pool don't really worry too much about terrain or slowing down in general. There are only a few maps, a couple Vampire Counts maps in the Marches, like Hellfen, that are a problem, but other than that, Strider's not incredibly amazing. Brutes of the Hound, or Marauder Berserkers, aligned with Khorne, that cause fear and are unbreakable. The Beasts of Tashnar are Norscan Warhounds with Frenzy, increased missile resistance, and a small bonus versus Large for hunting down enemy skirmisher cavalry or helping the Skin Wolves on the flanks win the cav fight. Miststalkers are Fimir warriors with Stalk, which is admittedly pretty hilarious, having gigantic monster units move around unseen throughout the battlefield, but in the lore, they are known for their mist shrouds that follow them and kind of cloak their movements, so it is logical and pretty cool, even if the visual effect isn't quite over the top enough to actually truly hide a monster that big. But my lord, do these guys look badass. They are terrifying. They actually do literally cause terror, but they're just terrifying to look at. They sunder armor. They have armor piercing on top of that, so that's just insane armor piercing damage with magical attacks, and all that combined is just incredibly strong. They also have Vanguard, so these dudes are going to be incredibly expensive to field, but sound like they could be incredibly strong as well. The Maws of Savagery are armored skin wolves with Vanguard and glowing red eyes, although you didn't really get a good look at the glowing red eyes in this look at them. They're going to be pretty fun. I like that idea. Vanguard on Skin Wolves is pretty strong, even though these are more the frontline version, less the flanker, less armored version. But still, I can imagine that'll be pretty strong if used correctly. And then the Icehorn Marauders are immune to Psychology and immune to Vigor, so they'll be a pretty nice mainline troop. Finally, we have Brettonia, which everyone has access to as they were the huge free content drop back in February. The Beast Slayers of Bastogne are Foot Squires, not knights. Remember, Foot Squires are glorified men-at-arms / peasants. They are not knights. They're not Virtue of Empathy knights, so don't worry about the dismounted thing. But they have halberds and charge defense versus Large. The Holy Wardens of La Macentel Abbey are battle pilgrims with dual wield, a hammer, and a flaming sword. They looted off dead Grail Knights with improved offensive stats and fire and magic attacks, so they sound like they could be a real good option against the Wood Elves, except that now the Wood Elves, of course, have the Firebark Elders, which will grant them a lot of that resistance against fire. And the Companions are questing knights with fire resistance and the Blessing of the Lady, granting physical resistance while unbroken. So almost all the way to Grail Knights there, but instead they're more with the two-handed greatswords, and they have a lot of armor-piercing damage, so they could be pretty strong. Knights of the Lionhearted are aligned with Luen-Lioncourt and Couronne, the capital city of Brettonia. They cause fear, encourage friendlies, and have magical attacks. Defenders of the Fleur de Lis are Knights Errant with Frenzy, and finally the Wardens of Montfort are mounted yeomen with poison ranged attacks and slightly better melee values for getting into melee and running down enemy skirmishers. So that is everything. Those are the Regiments of Renown coming in this new update. Pretty cool surprise and present for the community, I think. They're a lot of fun to use in multiplayer for sure. Cannot wait to get my hands on them. Hopefully, alongside that, there will also be a robust balance patch that benefits the game as a whole, and this will be a perfect opportunity for CA to address some of the problems Regiments of Renown currently have in campaign. Obviously, not everybody loves the implementation of these Regiments of Renown in single player, and the head-to-head campaign especially. There's some really cheesy stuff you can do with them, But CA has an opportunity here to rework some of that a bit and get rid of some of that cheesy stuff like disbanding and instantly re-recruiting one of these Regiments of Renown across the map wherever they're needed. Like, you shouldn't be able to do that. There should be some kind of cooldown between when you can actually summon them again. Maybe add a bit more requirements so they aren't quite so easy to obtain, so you feel a bit more rewarded when you unlock them, that kind of thing. And I hope you guys enjoyed this look at the new units. Let me know what you think about them. Are you excited for these new units, or would you have preferred something else? Obviously, I think a lot of us would have loved real new units, as in like Gorgon, Doombull, Jabberslife, and stuff. I think that might have been a bit, well, I won't say it's too much to ask for a free LC, but I think 30 new units for a free content update is pretty nice. I mean, I don't know if they've ever done a free LC this big before, except for Brettonia, so it's definitely not a bad addition to the game. And what do you think the rest of the free content for the Empire, Greenskins, Vampire Counts, and Dwarfs will be? Because remember, they are getting some more stuff as well. We just don't know exactly what it is yet. Do you think it's going to be Legendary Lord reworks, faction reworks, new starting positions? What do you guys think? Thank you all for watching. Again, hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in the next video. Indie Pride signing out for now.